Hello, welcome to the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
You ever sit in front of a birthday cake that doesn't exist? I did. 10 years old, sitting at the scratched-up oak table in our tiny Indiana kitchen, staring at a paper plate with nothing on it but a few sad crumbs from someone else's lunch. I remember my legs swinging under the chair, too short to touch the floor, listening for the telltale rustle of a grocery store bag, the jingle of keys, the slam of the car door, anything that meant someone had remembered. But the only sound I heard that day was the hum of the refrigerator and the clink of a spoon against my mom's coffee cup as she absent-mindedly stirred in her second packet of sweetener, looking everywhere but at me. That year, she said she had a headache. My dad said he thought Mom was handling the cake. She said she thought he was. And I, 10-year-old me, sat there quietly while Samantha, 5 years younger and covered in finger paint, clambered up onto the table and started singing Happy Birthday in a voice that didn't know it was mocking. I remember laughing. Not because it was funny. Because I didn't want to cry. That laugh, half swallowed and too loud, has followed me for the next 27 birthdays. It wasn't always like that. There were a couple early years when they tried, or maybe pretended to. I've seen the photos, me at 4 with a lopsided chocolate cake, candles jammed in sideways like little soldiers falling in battle. But those stopped quick. By the time I was 7, birthdays became just another day, unless they fell on a weekend and my parents felt guilty enough to toss a frozen pizza in the oven and call it dinner. I don't remember a single wrapped gift after age 8. No singing, no cards, no parties. Just quiet dinners, the kind where everyone's looking at the TV, but no one's really watching. Now, Samantha, that was a different story. From the moment she could pronounce her own name, the world bent to fit her. Her birthdays were Pinterest boards brought to life, even before Pinterest existed. I still remember her 6th birthday party. She wanted a princess tea party. Our backyard was decked out in pastel streamers, plastic tiaras, glitter-covered cupcakes. Dad dressed up as a court jester, no joke. I was 11, and they made me hand out cake in a sparkly pink apron like I was the hired help. I didn't even get a slice until everyone else had finished. They always had reasons. Money's tight this year. We'll do something next weekend. You're older now, it's not as big a deal. That last one became their favorite line when I hit high school. But funny enough, when Sam hit 16, money suddenly wasn't tight. She got a sweet 16 bash in a rented barn with chandeliers, fairy lights, and a live band that played nothing but Taylor Swift covers. They flew in her best friend from California and catered the whole thing with wood-fired pizza and gourmet cupcakes with her initials piped on top. I got a text that day that said, "Don't forget to pick up the balloons." I was 21 and in college, but I left work early, skipped class, and drove home with a trunk full of helium and a lump in my throat. It wasn't just the birthdays. It was everything. When I got accepted into Purdue, they said, "That's great, but it's a lot of money." When Sam got into some private school in Chicago, they drove up every weekend to help her decorate her dorm and filled her fridge with enough groceries to feed a small militia. When I got married, it was a courthouse deal, just me, my ex, and 2 strangers who signed as witnesses. My mom didn't even take the afternoon off work. But when Sam got engaged, they threw her an engagement brunch, a bridal shower, a pre-bachelorette wine tasting weekend, and I don't even know what else. I told myself for years that it didn't bother me, that it was just how things were, that I was the quiet one, the independent one, the she's fine one. But something cracked when I saw that wedding invoice. I wasn't even snooping. It was just there, left out on the counter when I dropped by unannounced, a rare thing for me. I only came because my car had broken down nearby and I needed to borrow Dad's old truck. There it was. An itemized bill from some wedding planner that probably wore pearls to bed and charged for air. $53,000. 53. For Sam's wedding. Cake, $1,200. Dress, $6,000. Floral arch, $4,500. Lighting, $2,900. Custom vows coaching, yes, apparently that's a thing, was $800. I stood there staring at the page like it was a death certificate, trying to remember the last time my parents spent $50 on me. I couldn't. That number haunted me for weeks. 53,000. It kept echoing in my head like a bad song on repeat. Not because it was absurd, which it was, but because I had asked them for almost that exact amount 5 years earlier. I was 28, recently divorced, looking to buy my first place. I had scraped together a decent down payment, but needed a little help to push me over. I didn't even ask for a gift, just a short-term loan. I still remember how they looked at me like I'd asked for a kidney. My dad said, "We're not a bank, Heather." My mom chimed in with, "We just can't afford that kind of help." So I took out a worse loan. Higher interest. And I lived in a tiny 2-bedroom with carpet that smelled like wet socks for the better part of a decade. That wedding cost more than my entire house. And here's the part that really bites. If you take out the floral arch and the lighting, the remaining total was almost exactly what I asked for. That was the exact amount I asked them for to help with a down payment on my first house. They told me they didn't have it. I didn't even want to go, if we're being honest, and the only reason I showed up at all was because my best friend Lana guilted me into it, saying I'd regret it forever if I didn't at least see it with my own eyes. There was a part of me, buried under 20 years of being overlooked, that still held onto the impossible idea that someone might notice if I didn't show up, not out of obligation, but because I mattered, because I was their daughter too. Turns out, people only notice absence when it ruins the photo lineup. The morning of Samantha's wedding was like something out of a Hallmark Channel fever dream. I pulled up to the venue, a remodeled country estate with white columns, a cobblestone drive, and parking attendants in matching beige vests, and immediately questioned every life choice that had led me there. The air smelled like expensive perfume, freshly cut hydrangeas, and a not-so-subtle undertone of generational wealth. I walked past a white horse-drawn carriage parked near the main garden, its driver holding a silver flask behind his back, and tried not to laugh at how absurd it all was. Samantha had always wanted to be a princess, and now she'd finally bought her kingdom. Walking into the reception area, I instantly regretted not taking Lana's advice to wear something a little more media-worthy. I had gone with a simple black dress, not out of protest, but because it was the only thing in my closet that didn't wrinkle like paper. Everyone else looked like they were headed to a Vanity Fair spread. Sequins, velvet, heels that could kill a man. I stood in the entryway for a moment, ignored by the check-in girl with the clipboard and the perfect teeth, and realized that I was the only person not actively being greeted by someone. The ceremony hadn't even started yet, but the back lawn was already packed. Rows of white wooden chairs were lined up like obedient soldiers, each one tied with a blush pink ribbon. There were string lights dangling from tree to tree, flickering even though the sun was still high. A quartet played near the fountain, trying their best to make a Taylor Swift cover sound like Mozart. I found a spot near the edge, behind someone's great aunt or possibly a small hedge, and tried to melt into the background. It worked. Then the music shifted, and out came Samantha, in a dress so white it could have blinded God. The crowd gasped audibly, like a sitcom laugh track. The veil alone was longer than my first marriage. She looked beautiful, of course she did. She always did. And behind her, my parents. My mother in some champagne-colored silk number that probably cost more than my car's down payment, and my dad in a tuxedo that he definitely rented but would pretend was his own. They looked radiant, beaming, giddy, like proud royalty showing off their only heir. And in that moment, standing there watching them escort Sam down the aisle like she was being offered up to Olympus itself, I felt something ugly and sour rise in my throat, not jealousy, not quite, more like a kind of grief. The kind you feel when you realize something you needed never actually existed. The reception started with custom cocktails named after their pets, followed by an open bar so extravagant it had its own bartender just for whiskey. Then came the first dress change. Samantha reappeared in a gold mermaid-cut gown that looked like it had been dipped in actual molten money. She gave a speech thanking her incredible parents, who had supported her every dream, every step, every year, and my mother dabbed at her eyes like she was in a soap opera. I stood near the exit, sipping something called a minted matrimony and trying not to gag on the saccharin. That's when they wheeled out the cake. It was massive, a 4-tier monstrosity covered in gold leaf and sugar roses. A woman with a headset announced each layer symbolized a milestone: her undergrad degree, her law school graduation, her real estate license, and I think the last one was just for show, maybe a metaphor for potential or some nonsense. Either way, 4 is half of 7. Math's not my strong suit. The church people were there too, the ones who hadn't seen me in over a decade. Some of them squinted at me like I was a distant cousin or a very convincing caterer. One woman whispered to another, "I thought Heather moved to New York or maybe passed away." I smiled politely and said nothing. Dead people don't cause scenes. And then came the final slap. The music died down. My father took the mic. It was time for the father-daughter dance, a tradition I never had, not even on my wedding day. The lights dimmed, a soft jazz song started, and Ed Jameson, the man who once forgot my 13th birthday because he was golfing, took his daughter by the hand and led her to the floor. He started his toast with, "To the daughter who made us proud every single day." That sentence hit like a steel bat to the ribs. He didn't even say her name, didn't need to. The room erupted in applause. I stood there frozen, my wine glass still in hand, and every nerve in my body screamed for me to leave, but I didn't. Not yet. Because here's the thing. That line? It didn't break me. It woke me the hell up. In that moment, watching them spin and twirl to some sentimental Sinatra song, I realized I'd been playing their game on mute for years, hoping for a single note in my key. I'd been quiet. I'd been patient. I'd excused, defended, and rationalized every slight. No more. I walked out before dessert. But not before I took a picture of the check that my mom had left on the planner's table, the one that showed "paid in full" in thick red ink. I tucked it into my clutch and didn't look back. I cut off all contact that night. But that wasn't the end of it, it was just the start. The morning after Samantha's wedding, my phone lit up with more missed calls than I'd seen in years, but I ignored every single one of them because I already knew what they were going to say, and I had zero interest in hearing another dramatic, guilt-drenched voicemail from the woman who used to tell people she only had one emotional daughter, like I was some long-forgotten middle school poetry phase. Blocking them was easy. I didn't cry, I didn't hesitate, I didn't overthink. I just tapped and deleted and moved on like I was sweeping dirt into a dustpan after years of watching it pile up in the corners. Then came the social media onslaught, which was honestly the most pathetic part. I hadn't used Facebook much in years, but I kept the account active to stay in touch with a few old college friends and my coworkers who liked tagging me in staff lounge photos that made it look like we were one big happy family instead of a bunch of overworked educators slowly losing our minds. That morning, I woke up to find I'd been tagged in an album titled "Family That Shows Up," and if that's not a passive-aggressive slap in the teeth, I don't know what is. Every photo in the album was a carefully curated middle finger, my parents with Samantha and her new husband, posing under floral arches and holding champagne glasses like they were auditioning for a credit card commercial. In one of them, my dad had his arm around Sam's shoulder and was pointing proudly toward the camera, and in the caption, my mom had written, "To the daughter who always made us feel seen." I stared at that line for a full minute, eyes twitching, mouth open, heart rate steady, not because I was calm, but because rage has a way of sharpening into something ice-cold once it simmers long enough. I didn't respond. Not a word. But I did untag myself from every photo and posted a single line on my own profile that said, "Silence is how you reclaim the energy they steal," which got more likes than I expected, and a private message from my old therapist asking if I was okay. I didn't answer her either. A few days later, the voicemail came. Mom's voice, watery and forced, telling me she was devastated by my absence and that I had humiliated the family by leaving early. She said Samantha was crying, and I could practically hear the imaginary tears in the background soundtrack of her monologue. Then she dropped her favorite phrase, the one she used every time I called her out on anything. "I just don't understand where this disrespect comes from, Heather. We've always done our best." I almost threw my phone across the room, not because I was angry, but because it felt like déjà vu wrapped in emotional blackmail, sprinkled with the kind of denial only suburban mothers can perfect after a few decades of holding the steering wheel of everyone else's reality. I played the message for Lana later that night while we drank boxed wine on her couch, the two of us wrapped in oversized hoodies and the kind of friendship that survives ugly crying and shared silence. She listened with one eyebrow raised and said, "You know you can't just let this go, right?" I nodded, not because I was convinced, but because I was tired. Tired of holding the line, tired of biting my tongue, tired of being the mature one while they threw glitter-covered grenades from behind family photos. Then the letter came. It wasn't a card, it wasn't a peace offering, it was a notice from a credit union I didn't even bank with, addressed to me, stating that my name had been used as a cosigner on a personal loan. At first, I thought it was a scam. I squinted at the letterhead, Googled the return address, and even called the listed number to confirm it wasn't one of those phishing things. But it was real. Very real. The loan was issued 6 months ago. Amount? $25,000. Purpose? Event expenses. Borrower? Samantha Jameson. Cosigner? Marilyn Jameson and me. The world didn't spin, it cracked, because I never signed a damn thing. I called the bank, furious, and after 3 departments and 2 hours of being transferred like a hot potato, I finally got someone who told me that the cosigner form had been submitted electronically with verified ID upload. Apparently, someone had scanned an old copy of my driver's license and used a digital signature, which didn't match my real one in the slightest, but was close enough to pass some underpaid clerk's test. I felt sick. My mother had stolen my identity to fund the wedding I wasn't even wanted at. I sat on my kitchen floor with the letter in one hand and a spoonful of peanut butter in the other, staring at the wall like it owed me something. Lana, when she came over later and heard the whole thing, didn't gasp or shriek. She just poured 2 glasses of wine and said, "Okay, we're past petty now. Time for precision." I wasn't going to sue. That would have been too easy. I was going to ruin their image slowly, from the inside out. Revenge, when it's done right, doesn't look like fire. It looks like frost, slow and creeping, taking its time to settle into the bones of the thing you're trying to destroy. I didn't want to scream or burn bridges or make a scene. That wasn't my style, never had been. If I was going to dismantle the perfect porcelain dollhouse image my parents had built around Samantha and themselves, I was going to do it like a winter storm, steady, silent, devastating. And I wanted to feel every moment of it like therapy I didn't have to pay for. The first step was the church, because if you really want to watch good suburban people panic, threaten their standing in the place where they dress up once a week and pretend none of their children are ungrateful or divorced. My parents' lives revolved around that church. The bake sales, the Sunday potlucks, the prayer chains, the Facebook albums of them smiling next to casseroles and pretending they believed in grace. I knew they'd recently been put on some finance committee, overseeing donations or budgets or whatever busy work they used to pretend they weren't retired and bored. So I did what any scorned daughter with an internet connection and a scanner would do. I took the letter from the credit union, highlighted my name, circled the date, and mailed an anonymous packet to every board member listed on the church's leadership website. No return address. Just documentation, printed clean and crisp, with a note that read, "Financial misconduct shouldn't be rewarded with power." I pictured them reading it in their beige dining rooms, clutching their pearls and wondering who would dare attack such a lovely family. Someone always dares. Someone always knows. Then came Samantha. Sweet, curated, Perfect life Samantha, who had carefully crafted a world online where everything was golden hour lighting and motivational quotes, and married to my best friend, captions under pictures of herself in various wide-brimmed hats. Her whole income depended on her brand, which was mostly built on pretending she was a kind of aspirational Midwest fairy tale, law degree in one hand, organic latte in the other, smiling through teeth so white they probably scared small animals. But I knew the truth. I knew about the Etsy shop she never reported. I knew about the free products she got and forgot to log as income. I knew because she used to brag about it to me over wine when we were still pretending to be sisters. So I sent a little tip to the IRS. Not as myself, of course, as a concerned citizen who noticed a few discrepancies. I included screenshots of posts advertising, limited-time promo codes, and links to affiliate programs. I mentioned the luxury brand trip she took last year, the one where she posted a dozen bikini photos and tagged the resort, but never marked them as ads. I didn't expect a full audit, but I knew the whisper of one would rattle her nerves like a loose tooth you can't stop poking. And while I was digging, I remembered something else, something petty, something old, something delicious. Back when my mom worked part-time at a local medical office, she used to brag about how she never bought printer paper again. I was a teenager when I first heard her say it, laughing over wine with her coworkers, showing off how many office supplies she'd walked out with over the years. Pens, folders, copy paper, even a coffee machine once during a renovation. It had seemed harmless then, just another example of my mother's casual entitlement. But now? It felt like a perfectly aged bottle of revenge waiting to be uncorked. I found the photos. She had proudly taken pictures of the stash once, posted them in a now-defunct Facebook group for thrifty moms. With a little digging and some screen recording from an old hard drive I hadn't touched in years, I put together a neat little package and emailed it directly to her former boss, who still ran the same office and, according to Yelp, had recently been stung by budget cuts. The subject line simply read, "Something you might want to see. Attachments included." But my favorite move, the one that felt like planting a trapdoor under a runway, involved a man named Chris, who happened to be Samantha's college boyfriend before she met her shiny, jawline-heavy husband. Chris was smart, kind, maybe too much of a dreamer, and very much the guy Sam cheated on the week before her graduation. I remembered his name because I had liked him. He had tried too hard to win over our family, brought my mom flowers once, even shook my dad's hand and called him sir like it was the 1950s. And then Sam broke him like a toy and tossed him in the drawer. Finding him wasn't hard. A quick search led me to a modest LinkedIn page, a small business website, and a professional Instagram full of home remodels and adorable dogs. I messaged him, carefully, kindly, and asked if he ever wondered what really happened that spring. When he replied, confused but curious, I told him everything. And then, with only a gentle nudge, I let him know that Sam's new husband, the one always in her YouTube thumbnails, probably didn't know the whole story. Chris didn't respond after that, not for a while. But 3 weeks later, I noticed Sam removed over 200 photos from her feed and posted a quote about growth through adversity. The funny thing is, I didn't feel triumphant, not really. There was no movie soundtrack in the background, no slow-motion strut down a hallway while everything exploded behind me. Instead, I felt this strange tightness in my chest, a kind of distant ache that I couldn't quite place, like I was mourning something I had never really had. I found myself thinking about my mother, about how she used to smirk when she told little lies, how she'd tilt her head and play the victim when someone called her out. I started catching glimpses of that same look in the mirror, the same tilt, the same practiced smile, the same cool tone. I didn't like it. Then came the text from Dad. Just 4 words. "You finally got us." Revenge doesn't end with fireworks or applause or some smug little scene where the villain gets dragged out in handcuffs while the credits roll, and it certainly doesn't end with you feeling victorious or whole or redeemed. despite what every movie and overpriced self-help book tells you. Sometimes revenge ends with silence, heavy, echoing, bitter silence that stretches out like a cold hallway, no doors, no light, just the sound of your own breath and the weight of everything you thought would feel good landing like ash in your mouth. In the weeks after everything unraveled, I didn't speak to anyone in my family, and for once, they didn't try to force it. No more Facebook posts. No more voicemails. No cryptic Bible verses in Instagram captions meant to passive-aggressively suggest forgiveness or martyrdom. The silence, at first, felt like justice, a clean break, a pause in the chaos, the kind of void I had wanted for years, but never thought I'd be brave enough to choose. But then the pieces started falling, and not just in the way I had imagined, but in ways that made it hard to tell where the line was between cause and consequence. Samantha lost a brand deal, maybe more than one, though it was the big one that made the local paper, a regional partnership with some eco-friendly skincare company that quietly removed her from their website without announcement. Her follower count dropped, her comment sections filled with speculation, and within a month she had taken down her collab inquiries link. I didn't feel sorry for her, not exactly, but I didn't celebrate either. Watching her curated life pixelate and dissolve felt less like revenge and more like watching someone drop a cake they didn't bake. I had wanted her to feel what I felt. Instead, I just watched her fumble, and it felt hollow. My father was reassigned from his leadership position at the church, which in small-town religious terms is basically a polite public shaming with a side of spiritual exile. One of my mother's friends told Lana, who then told me, that several of the committee members were deeply disappointed in how Ed had misrepresented financial trustworthiness. It wasn't a full scandal, not enough to hit the news or ruin his retirement, but it was enough to make sure he wasn't invited to any more golf trips or budget planning meetings or men's retreats in the Smoky Mountains. He didn't fight it, not from what I heard. He just stopped showing up. Marilyn's social calendar dried up like a forgotten salad in the back of a church fridge. The women she used to bake with, host showers with, gossip with over lemon bars and white wine spritzers, suddenly stopped replying to her group texts. She was no longer Marilyn, proud mother of Samantha. She was Marilyn, who forged her own daughter's signature and acted like it was no big deal. That kind of title sticks in a town like ours, where people remember the shape of your eyebrows from middle school and can recite your prom dress color, even if they didn't go. And me? I felt nothing. Or at least I thought I didn't. I worked, I read, I went on long walks around my block like I was avoiding something inside the house I wasn't ready to name. I drank tea instead of wine. I stopped checking Facebook. I ghosted every extended cousin who tried to slide into my inbox with some version of, "You know they're still your family, right?" I thought about therapy. I downloaded the app. I deleted it 2 days later. Then came the knock. It was a quiet knock. Not frantic, not dramatic, just soft and slow, like whoever was on the other side wasn't sure they should be there. I knew before I opened it. I knew the weight of it. I knew the posture, the way the years had curved his shoulders, the way his hands shook just enough to make me wonder if it was guilt or age. My father stood there, not in a suit, not in some apologetic formal wear, but in a windbreaker and jeans, his face smaller than I remembered, like it had deflated. He didn't yell. He didn't demand. He didn't cry. He just looked at me for a long second and said, "Thank you." I didn't respond. I didn't nod or open the door wider or invite him in. I waited. He said it woke him up. Said he hadn't realized how far things had gone. Said that the silence, for once, made him hear what the noise had buried. "I don't expect forgiveness," he added, like he'd rehearsed it, maybe even written it down. "But I needed you to know I see it now." Then he handed me a worn-out manila envelope, nodded once, and walked away. Inside was a photo album. Old, cheap, vinyl pages curling at the corners, each one holding moments I'd barely remembered. Heather's 4th birthday, a pink paper crown, no guests. Heather's 7th, a grocery store cupcake and a napkin with happy birthday written in blue pen. Heather at 13, arms crossed, no cake in sight, standing next to a deflated balloon. Photos I didn't know existed. Evidence not of celebration, but of existence. And at the very back, tucked between the last pages, was a letter. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was my mother's. I sat with it in my lap for over an hour before I finally opened it, expecting some half-assed apology, maybe a defense, maybe another version of "we did our best." But the words surprised me. "We failed you," it said, plain and brutal. "We followed tradition instead of fairness. We mistook obedience for love. We let your silence justify our choices." That's not an excuse. It's just the truth. No signature. No plea. Just that. At the very back of the album, taped shut and marked in red ink, was another envelope labeled Heather's 18th. I held it in my hands for a long time. I could feel something thick inside, maybe a card, maybe money, maybe nothing but paper trying to pretend it meant something. I turned it over twice. Then I walked out onto the porch and burned it in the ashtray my mother gave me for college. The one she joked was just in case you ever need to let something go. I never replied to my dad's message. I never spoke to my mom again. And no, I don't regret cutting them off. But sometimes at night, I wonder, if I had just waited one more year, would it have been different? And what the hell was in that last envelope?